Do you wonder what an extra $17 will get you when you move from the Piscifun Flame at $23 to the Piscifun Viper at $40? Well, I'm going to make that comparison so you can see how the Piscifun line of reel evolves in terms of additional capability for additional price. Stay tuned. The next reel in the Piscifun line above the Flame is the Viper. The Flame costs $23 right now. The Viper costs $40. So what do you get? You get the same long cast spool design, a graphite body, but again, you get the aluminum spool that is not going to crack like a graphite spool would. So they've maintained that consistency between the low end and this next one up in the lineup. Now the Viper only had 9 bearings. This has 10. Of course, they all have the anti-reverse bearing. And just like the Viper, just like the Flame, the bearings are double sealed stainless, so they will resist corrosion. Now the Viper had a 5.2 to 1 gear ratio. This ramps it up to 6.2 to 1, which is pretty much the industry standard, and that'll give you a nice fast retrieve. The Viper had a 19-pound drag. This has a 22-pound, so you get a couple extra pounds for the extra $17. This is also lighter. It only weighs 8.6 ounces versus the 8.9 on the Flame. Now the guts of this are also upgraded for the additional cost. It has an anti-corrosion shaft that is made out of stainless steel and a zinc alloy drive gear with a sealed drag knob. I'm not going to do a torture test on the drag washers because this video right here did a much better job and proved that the carbon fiber drag washers that Piscifun uses are robust and certainly much better than the cork or felt washers you see on less capable reels.
You can see, guys, you can still perfectly see the carbon pattern here. There's very, very little scarring considering we just beat this drag up more than it will ever be beat up in an entire lifetime of fishing by ripping it the way we did. So normally what you would see is you'd see shiny spots and scarring if it was really bad. As you can see, there's very little of any of that to note.
But right now, let's get into some physical tests to test whether this lays line on, does it have a wobble, and how precise is it in terms of making sure that the line is put on the spool absolutely perfectly. It did come with a couple of these small washers to use if the spool is just a little bit out of tolerance. Hopefully it comes right from the factory good to go. It has the upgrade to the rubberized braid grip right here. Have the line on the grip and it grips instantly. That's a pretty good upgrade from the Flame. Now let's see how it lays line on here. I do not see any wobble at all in the spool, and it appears that the line is going down exactly level. That is perfect. No gap between the base or the top, and the 150 yards is perfect to hit that X spool format and achieve a greater casting distance. I do not see any wobble left or right as I reel, and of course that would have probably become obvious by laying down the line in an uneven fashion. Let's take a look at the physical differences between the Flame and the Viper. The first thing that is pretty obvious right here is the drag on the Viper is a lot larger than the drag on the Flame, which is probably the reason why the Viper has a better performance in terms of the drag. The drag itself is smooth and the clicks are a lot more audible than they were over here on the Flame. Like the Flame, it has the long cast spool design, but the angle is sharper right here, which I think will mean that the line will move off the spool a lot easier. Just like the Flame, It's got what appears to be a heavy-duty bail, and it looks like the same roller right here. It is smooth, and the handle is a little bit larger than what you see over here on the Flame, which means that it's probably going to be easier to grip and will be easier on you in a long day of fishing. We're out here to do the casting test, and you may ask, why do you do a casting test with reels? Isn't that just for rods? Well, no, there are a couple things I want to know about each of these reels as we do this test. First, does the line come off smoothly? Does it tangle? Is the X-spool long cast design producing a long cast? And then finally, as I reel it in, the tension on the line is going to vary, unlike when I put it on with the spool. So I want to see, does the reel handle that and still lay the line down nice and even on the spool? I've got a 1-ounce lure, and I'm using the Piscifun Serpent rod, and that will be consistent across all these. I'll cast 3 times, we'll mark it, and we'll proceed. Now let's see how the Viper does. Same conditions, and we'll compare it back to the Flame. Well, the results are in. Using the Viper as compared to the Flame, I got about 4 to 5 more feet of casting distance. So the spool design must be slightly different that gives better performance. And in terms of reeling everything back in, you can see that everything is still nice and level, even though it was bumpy and some was slack and some was tight. So in the next episode, we're going to compare the Viper performance to the Carbon X. I hope you tune in and check out that one. Now let's go back to the shop and summarize. Well, let's update the spec table so you can see the difference between these two reels. Take a few seconds now to check out the overview spec table, and you can make your own call on which one is right for you. There you go. That wraps up this episode of the playlist where we looked at the Viper versus the Flame. In the next episode, we're going to compare the Viper against the next level up in the line, which is the Carbon X reel. So click ahead and stay tuned for that one. That wraps up the Flame versus the Viper. In the next video in this playlist, I'm going to compare the Viper to the Carbon X. Let's see what you get for another $20. Stay tuned.